during this Christmas season, there might be a few people on earth who think about Christ, who think about the man who lived here on earth. Now, anyone who begins to think seriously about Christ and his ministry here on earth, the first thing you do is to have a sense of separation from Christ, of distance, of unattainability, of mystery and bewilderment. You have heard that he lived many years ago. He performed miracles. He gave teachings, and you've seen books in which his words were written down. And you've seen replicas of him, pictures of him, which are supposed to be him, although no one really knows what he looked about physically. But the main idea in your mind when you think about Christ at all is one of mystification. He's not close. And you go into awe. And you think about the word Christ. You think of the picture you saw when you were a child in Sunday school, and that flashes through your mind. Now, you have been taught here in this room, and will continue to be taught, that all attempts to solve the mystery of Christ, of God, spirituality, all attempts to solve it through words, through ideas, through memory of pictures of what Christ was supposed to look like, all attempts to solve the mystery of Christ and what he lived for and stood for, all attempts to solve it by thinking about it must fail. Thought, idea, belief, opinion, religious creeds are always separated from the Spirit of Christ. Human beings who don't understand this, and furthermore don't want to understand it, immediately say, I do understand. And they build churches, and they write books which become bestsellers, and they quote, and they dress up on Sundays, and they become the enemies of Christ. They become not even the passive enemy, but the active, aggressive, all-out enemy of everything that Christ stood for, and here's why. Idea is always the enemy of spirit. The two can't live together. They don't live together. They're not compatible. Idea doesn't want spirit, and spirit doesn't want idea. Light doesn't want darkness. Dark doesn't want light. So you have to study your own ideas and beliefs about Christ, the human being who lived a while back. You have to study your own attitudes, beliefs, desperations even. God help me, that sort of thing. You have to study all your acquired ideas about Christ, and when you have studied them thoroughly, you must, if you're honest and sincere, you must come to the conclusion that all memorized self-references references about Christ and God are the very thing that is keeping you distant and mystified, that makes you feel that coming close to Christ and his truth is unattainable, which it is, as long as you are trying to find God in Christ. Now there's a trick which billions of human beings who have heard of Christ play on themselves. That trick is to say cunningly to yourself, this is the ego talking, I really don't want to solve the mystery that confronts me about Christ, because I sense if I solved it, I could not be me, the worshiper, the believer, the follower of Christ. See, as long as there's a follower of Christ, there is no understanding, there is no life. To follow Christ as an idea is emptiness, it's folly. And oh, how dangerous it is. So dangerous that the world has gone crazy in its religions. All religions are crazy, mad. All religionists are mad. Now you're going to have to determine, and you might as well do it right now, that you are not going to hide like a little miserable, wretched coward like the world does. You are not going to hide behind your deliberately induced self-confusion about Christ, about God, about reality. You're going to have to make up your mind to understand the source of your separation, which is your beliefs. Understand that that separation is a false reward, a false thrill, because there is the myriad of yous, you, I, here, all changing masks, changing ideas, changing beliefs, changing desperations, in order to maintain an image, a picture, an idea of you having various facets of religiosity worshiping Christ. If you could see it, you would see that what is important to you presently is not Christ at all. And certainly not what he taught, because he was an integrated human being. He was what he taught. He taught what he was. You have to see that the last thing the ego nature, the religious hypocrites are ever going to do is to dissolve the barrier and approach Christ in spirit. You, in your present delusion, want to approach Christ in belief, which means that you're apart from God and truth, which means that you're a madman, a madwoman, with all the religious trappings on you and the way you talk and so on. Now, the evidence of everything that I've talked about couldn't be clearer. But who wants to see the evidence that is going to destroy what you and your false religious practices think is the only life you have? If you continue the way you are going, clinging to the present life you have, I will personally guarantee you that that is the only life you will have. Now, Christ came to earth to tell you precisely that. And if you want to look in the New Testament, you will find that everything that I've talked about so far is right in there. Different words, saying it in different ways. But all the facts are there. You know what we talk about here? We talk about situation and solution, right? What's the situation? You know what the situation is. You're a wreck. Solution, that's what we're working for, to see the solution. Situation is that there's nothing right. You prefer the mystery of separation from God. The solution is to see the mistake you're making and what that mistake cost you today and yesterday, and what's going to cost you tomorrow if you don't change. The world says change of mind is change of nature. It is not. Change of mind is change of mind. We're dedicated fiercely, and you try to get out of it, and I'll get you. We're dedicated not to change of mind, but change of nature. What has your unchristian nature done for you? Let me tell you a little bit about the nature of Christ. This will help you come a little closer. Knowledge can lead to higher things. Do you know how he lived on the earth? Relatively brief time. I think historians say 33 years at the most. You know how he lived? I'll tell you how he lived. He never had to ask anyone for anything. Physically, yes. Remember one time he asked the disciples, do you have food? Something like that. That's on this level. That's human level, which he had too, social level. He never had to ask anyone for anything. What's the difference in the way you live and the way he lived? All right. You have to ask everyone for everything. You can't behave from yourself at all, from your real self. Come on, I want to use a word. I want to use the word happiness. It's so simple and so general, but it has its place. Christ was an authentically happy human being. Why? Because self-completion is the same thing as happiness. Not excitement, but happiness. Happiness being the absence of misery. When you're normal, when you're whole, that is what happiness is. It's not acquisition. It's not getting the new car. When you don't have to ask anyone for anything, spiritually speaking, what does that mean? It means you already know, doesn't it? Anything comes up in your private life, your spiritual life, anywhere, any level, you always know what to do. Now you don't know what to do you? Isn't dependency one of the heaviest bricks on your back? Aren't your faces always looking around for someone you hope is stronger than you are, wiser than you are, someone who can give you something? Isn't it strange, pathetically strange, that after all these years, it hasn't occurred to you that it's no good looking to anyone? It's no good looking to that woman, man. It's no good looking to that woman. You get with her and you give her what you are. See how cruel you are. You want to get something from a woman, and yet you're cruel to her. You don't see any of the mess and the mix-up that happens. Your faces do not reflect honest inquiry, honest searching, but rather a desperate pleading, hoping that the other person has somehow found what has eluded you. And you're certainly horrible judges of human nature, because you, with your haunted face looks out at the haunted faces of men and women out there, and you don't even know that they're haunted. You know why? Because the desperation in you is so strong that when you look out at another person, you don't see them as scared, which they are. You don't see them as desperate, which they are. You don't see them as weak. You don't see them as people who are, same time you're planning to get something from them, they're planning to get something from you, because they're just like you. You're both alike. You don't see that your very desperation has twisted your vision so that you see them in the way that pleases your inadequacy. Doesn't the world have leaders? Aren't there political leaders, religious leaders, social leaders, leaders in the home, leaders in industry? People who are supposed to have the answers. Now look, you may think that you don't follow a political leader, and maybe you don't. Well, who are you following? Who do you men following that pretty girl in the room? You following her in your imagination, if not physically? You men following your own ideas of what it means to be successful or to be great? You are worshiping the accumulation of the ages of mankind, of ordinary thought, plus your own personal acquisitions. And you put together all your memorized ideas about God, truth, and life that you acquired from someone else, and then they get mixed up with your experiences, and then you have some of your own. You get them all piled up, and I'll tell you what that is. That's dreadful, painful, hellish separation from Christ, whose truth could set you free. You would better look and see what you're worshiping. And when you worship a false idol, such as your own conglomeration of thoughts, you're unaware of doing so. There's no such thing as worshiping an idol consciously. You do it with the daze in your eyes, chanting. You know, maybe you don't chant religious words. Maybe you don't wear religious objects. Maybe you don't go through religious ritual. But look, religious ritual is religious ritual. What is your ritual, which is just as false, no matter what label you put on it? All worship involves the weight of thought. The weight of thought causes pressure and pain. You, attached to that pressure and pain, call out to God for deliverance, not seeing that the you who is the pressure and the pain, is really your object of worship. And you know in your cunning that God, real God, Christ, is never going to answer your prayers to take you away because that is what you want to cling to yourself. Therefore, in further cunning, you can publicly and to yourself, through imagination and delusion, you can pretend that you want deliverance from Christ, from you, while continuing to play all your roles, and they have no intention of doing anything but staying in charge of you with your permission, because you are your roles, which is all you presently have. Christ is light. Now I'll tell you how you can know personally and experimentally whether you're approaching the Spirit of Christ. First of all, get all your memorized Sunday school pictures out of your mind. They'll mislead you. I'll tell you how you can tell for yourself. When you start to bring your darkness, which is a sacrifice, you're sacrificing the darkness of your preferred, acquired religious, hypocritical beliefs. When you pick up these dark beliefs and start to carry them toward the light of God, of Christ, it's a new experience. In the first place, it is something you've never, ever done before. When you really do it, and you can sense that it's a new experience. See, the feeling of a new, true, spiritual experience can't come from you. You can only give you, the old. A new experience which comes from the light of God, Christ, light on the mountain. A new experience will come to you and it will speak to you. The light speaks. The light instructs. Believe me, there's no mistaking what it says. See, insanity is confusion. Christ is clarity. The devil uses confusion and deception to make you think you're with Christ when you're not. You're with Satan. The message you get from Christ, from the light, is look at what you're carrying and drop it. Situation, solution. Look what you're carrying around. Your love of separation. You love being separated from God. That's the situation. That's the way it is. That's the fact. Okay, that's the fact. We're honest about it. We know it's there. We know what wretches we are, without getting an identification out of calling yourself a wretch. Solution. Well, you can't drop your misery. You can't drop your hatred. Try it. Try it. Try dropping your anger right now. You know it isn't going to work, don't you? You know you're going to be mad. You're going to be confused, mystified. But if you walk toward the light gives you the instruction to drop your confusion, which you're using to keep you intact. When the light tells you to drop your confusion, if you, what you can call your choice, matter of choice, which is what you do have, you choose to obey, then that very obedience to the instruction, drop your anger, drop your false life, the very obedience is the how. Obedience to truth is the how, is the method. Now, isn't that a relief? See, even asking how, and you always go like that. No, how? How do I get my marriage better? How do my husband, always the dramatics, right? People who go like that are dangerous. Stay away from them. Wherever, by the way, you see human beings going into stage performance, dramatics, you're looking at dangerous people. Well, aren't they playing a role? And isn't it wrong to play a role? Because when you play a role, you're not being real. If you're not real, then you're apart from God, apart from Christ. Christ himself once said something as follows. I don't know the exact words, and through all the translations, who knows whether the words came out just right, but also said, he said, the works that I do, you shall do also. Now, come on. What kind of works did he take care of when he was here on earth? He didn't build churches, did he? He didn't establish a new trade route to Rome and double the business of selling wheat to Rome. He went about his Father's business, didn't he? The works that I do, ye should do also. Now look, don't think about physical things. That will confuse you. Think about the source of the physical works. So he performed miracles, baby. So he taught the truth, so that it penetrated into this man and that woman on the hillside in Judea. I will rephrase what he said. He said, the works that I do, you shall do also. Now listen. The state that I am in, Christ speaking, the state that I am in, you can also have. Right? We're interested in being something, not doing something. Because if you are something, then the doing will follow the nature of the being and will always be right if the being is right. Correct? The separation and the distance from Christ is canceled out. It evaporates to the degree that you no longer have ideas about Christ or any other teacher. Thought, belief, opinion, conviction, all that, and that alone is the distance because it is time. Your time nature can't find the timeless that Christ talked about. As your time nature dissolves through understanding the practical necessity of it, the niceness of it, you can use any word you want, positive type word. As you see the goodness of dissolving your badness, time collapses. And there's no more distance between you and the Spirit of Christ because you have the same Spirit. You have the same Spirit that he had and that he has. Isn't there just one God? Therefore, isn't there only one Spirit? Here in this world with 4 billion people, 4 billion ideas, you can drop the ideas. You can know from yourself what he talked about. And do you know how you can know? Because you'll live it. And then you won't have to go around asking people anymore what to do. You'll have this higher instruction. All right, take a break. A true teacher, an authentic spiritual guide, will always have certain fundamental characteristics about his message. He will, of course, always put truth first and foremost. Nothing comes before that. Not the threats of people who hate the truth. Nothing whatever. But there is one special characteristic, which we're going to discuss, which a true teacher, such as Christ, always possesses. And possesses completely. That is, he understands it. He knows it. And that is, and these are opposites in a sense, what a true teacher knows is the complete ignorance of human nature. He knows that man is undeveloped. He knows that he's self-centered, he's egotistical, and therefore hostile toward anything that threatens to take away the one thing that he falsely believes in, which is himself. Now, Christ understood this. And because he was a complete man, he also understood the opposite of that, which is the height of divine wisdom. Christ understood he understood the existence of God, more than understood it. He lived it. He was it. The Spirit of God was in Christ as he occupied a physical body here on earth. Now, anytime you want, you can take the New Testament and put it on one side of the table and take a piece of paper on the other side and write down the 2 points that I just covered. The understanding of the lostness of human nature, how stubborn, how evil human beings are. And on the other part, on the other side of the paper, you can put the height of spiritual trueness, of what God himself knows, divine wisdom. Now, when you look at the New Testament, go all the way through it, you will find, it's very interesting, try it sometime if you like, you'll find that everything Christ said was an alternation between one or the other. Didn't he lash out at the scribes and Pharisees of the day? Said, outwardly you appear right, and inwardly you're wretches. And 1 second later he would say, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall find the kingdom of God. See? The truth shall set you free. This is very good as a mental exercise for you. I realize you are now thinking about what I just said, but right thought has its place. From now on, when you look at the world, when you look at spiritual teachings, you listen to the tapes when you come here, it is good practice to divide it and say, now which side is this on? Explaining the stupidity of human beings, explaining their suffering? Is that what that sentence or talk is dealing with? Or is it talking about that the opportunity for that man to no longer be that man? Remember last night I talked a little bit about situation and solution? Same thing, you see? Break it down into that. It will help your mind to work rightly, and that in turn will help you to understand things better. Now, we have to see what prevents us from going, a lot deeper into ourselves so we can go higher into supreme spiritual truth. and the one will be equaled by the other. As you know how lost you are, you will suspect the rescue that's waiting for you if you turn toward it. As you see 1 mile into the ignorance of human nature, you'll see 1 mile up into heaven, 2 miles each. It always is equal. It has to be equal, and always is. What prevents you as a spiritual student from following Christ's teaching, from getting rid of your own junk? And as Christ himself repeated over and over and over, and I'm going to put what he taught into modern language and illustration. He taught that the scribes and the Pharisees, the religious people, the truth haters, the religious hypocrites, he taught one word which we can bring up to date by calling it a showcase personality. He said, you're clean on the outside, inwardly you're not. A showcase. You know what a showcase is? A jeweler puts all his pretty baubles and beads and diamonds in the window. Showcase. That's to attract people. And once they get attracted to the showcase in the front window, then they come in and buy something. Showcase personality is what prevents us from seeing the depths and then at the same time seeing the heights. Showcase personality simply means everything. Now look, never mind appealing to the public. Don't you understand that your showcase, a false personality, is played before you? So you don't think about that. You think that you're being false by making a joke to the person sitting next to you at the banquet and maybe getting a little thrill over, said something funny that made him or her laugh. Don't you know at the same time that he is your audience, you're your own audience, and that audience feeling that you have is, quote mark, a reaffirmation of you as someone who can be clever. You can make, you don't see this, but you've got it. I made that person laugh. What are you talking about? You have a mind which you didn't build. You have a tongue which you didn't build. And that happens to work on the mechanical level. That said that, and you say, I got a laugh. There's no I in mechanical behavior of any kind at all. But because you haven't gone far enough into the depths, you can't see into the heights of the answer of that. And all the time, therefore, this showcase personality is performing both for the benefit of other people around us and for ourselves. The internal theater's going on. Here's a little story about that. We're bringing the New Testament up to date. Here's a modern parable. Here's a couple American reporters that are invited to tour a foreign country. And this country has a reputation of having a dictator over it. Ill rumors of bad things going on in the country. So the two reporters come over. And you know what happens, don't you? They're representatives of the press. And the officials of that foreign country know that they're going to take their stories back, and millions of Americans are going to read the story about this country. So what do? You know what they do. They put out the red carpet at the airport. And the officials and the generals with their medals, and the others who are not in uniform, well-dressed, and they come in, they greet the reporters and the other travelers who are with them. And guess what they do? They take them to the best hotel in town. There may be only one, but they take them to the best hotel in town. They take them for a tour of the country. They show them the new farms that they've opened up for the common people. And they show the new hospital they have. They show them the downtown district where business is flourishing. They'll show them a showcase, right? Two reporters. One of them has been through it before. And he gets the other one aside and he says, meet me tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock and I'll show you the real country, right? And he meets him and they wander around. They go through the slums. And you know where they go? Besides the slums, they go to that enormous prison where anybody is thrown into in that country if they disagree with the politics, right? Showcase. Everybody does it. Every country does it. You do it. Showcase is always intellectual. It's always scheming. Always has some little plan whereby it can perpetuate, maintain, and strengthen its false idea of its existence. And I want to tell you what that is. That is the destruction of the spirit, the little opportunity spirit. It's not very large. That's the destruction of the spirit of opportunity that every human being has to understand fully what Christ talked about and lived, and live as he did. Your work begins right now. We're talking about this surface self. Do you know how you can tell how much of a showcase personality you have? Again, the degree factor enters into it. How much you're really afraid. Now, I said afraid. Don't try to find an object. Well, I'm afraid that I will get fired. Never mind that. Don't break it down like that. I'm talking about your whole mass of fears, and you have that, don't you? Isn't it very thick inside you? You're so afraid. And what you do, by the way, the wrong thing you do with the fear, is that you do break it down. You say, well, if I get fired and don't have any money, then I'll know what to do about it. And you give yourself an answer, you think, to that fear, but it doesn't do any good, does it? The answer is much higher than that. Please go a little deeper so you can go a little higher, go a whole lot deeper so you can go a whole lot higher. Take paper and pencil and write down my showcase personality. I bring this up because I know how prevalent it is right here in this room, for example. You men, you want to please that girl? All of you ladies, you want to please that man? Maybe he's not in this room necessarily, but someone else. You want to please someone? Anytime you have a thought about pleasing another human being, you are afraid of him and you hate him. And I'll tell you why. Because you, in your unconsciousness, you have blamed him or her for your fear. It all starts with you. All that fear starts with your ignorance. You have no business ever, again, never did have, blaming anyone for you being scared. I know, you know that it's a threatening world. It's a vicious humanity we live among. We know that. We're talking about something that is 1,000,000 miles above this world, above all your terrors. We're talking about something that exists above you. Why do you insist on living with you when you don't have to? Christ taught that you don't have to live with you anymore. Now, isn't it strange that didn't give you a feeling of great relief? It didn't. It didn't because you didn't see the height of that. It didn't because there's something in you that while I'm talking, something in you that wants to remain dull and unresponsive. And I'll give you the solution. I've given you the situation, I'll give you a solution. There are many solutions, all which make up one grand solution with a capital S. I want to give you, I really get as excited as I act here. I want to give you one of the most beautiful words in the English language or any other language. And you missed it because you were asleep. Write down this beautiful word. Explanation. What more do you want? Christ taught, we teach, that explanation shows you the situation and the solution. We're explaining everything. you should want nothing on earth except an explanation. Why haven't you taken it? Write down a sentence. Don't take explanation as condemnation. Don't take explanation as condemnation. Aren't you glad that that explanation shows you something new? Shows you that you, when you have looked inside yourself and saw all these facets of your showcase personality, that you did something wrong with it. And I'm explaining to you that you did something wrong. You condemned it. Don't you think that you have seen the depths of the mistake you make when you condemn yourself? When you condemn yourself, you think you affirm yourself, and what you do is strengthen the delusion that you are that sinner, that you are that weak person. Nothing can't be something. If there's no Vernon, or no Stella, or no Barry, if there's no person there, which there isn't, how can that nothing be something? That nothing can't be weak. It can't be evil. It can't be strong. It can't be wise. Take explanation without condemnation and see what a difference it makes. I just explained to you that there's a nothingness there, and later you'll see that that nothingness is everything. The absence of darkness is light. The absence of evil is good. So you're going to have to do a little sharp work there, aren't you? Also, do you understand that pride, vanity, conceit over telling the funny joke is the same thing as self-condemnation, because they're both self-reference, aren't they? We're trying to get rid of all thoughts that talk about me. Quite a task, huh? It's hard enough being right in this room where these explanations are made. Raise your hand. Do you really know, this is part of the depth, do you really know the world out there doesn't stand a chance? Do you know that? There's no chance. They won't come here. What I notice in the paper, the deeper meaning of Christ's teachings, which we're going into right now. All I see is familiar faces. All right. To quote, what is that to thee? What is that to us? We know better. We explain the situation and then we drop it. I want my energies for self-awakening, and I don't want to waste one bit of it. Neither do you. The showcase self is a horrible drain of various types of energy, even mental, which can be proper. A terrible drain of various types of energy, which, if the saved energy all comes together, could cause you sometime to do what I just did, which is to sit up and relax the hands, the face, and go real slow and just look around and know that this physical self is here and a lot of other physical selves around. And in the seeing, there is no interpretation at all. That's the trouble. We've got 1,000 interpreters and they all say a different thing, right? That person was once sharp to me about a month ago. Interpretation of what you see out of there. That person wanted to know if I wanted another piece of cake at the banquet, and I thought it was very thoughtful of him. He or she must be a very nice person. That person is younger than me. That person is a little more popular than I am in the group. Interpretation. Interpretation keeps us asleep, does it not? Christ taught, so many profound things, not only by what he said on the hillside on the Mount of Olives and elsewhere, but being a very rare kind of human being, he taught in another way besides words, and that other way is called presence. Being, if you prefer that word, he taught by being what he was. Do you understand that kind of nonverbal communication? You sense it, of course. His very presence, his physical presence, of course, when he was physically present, then that meant that his spirit was present, the spirit having inhabited the physical human body for the time, 33 years or whatever. So he taught just by being what he was. And do you know, by the way, before we go on to another point, that self-teaching, which is a marvelous thing, self-teaching consists of you allowing spiritual presence to come down and be with you wherever you are physically. Self-teaching does not mean you're consulting your mind, but rather, having gone beyond that, you relax and you release your mind, release all familiarities to permit the presence to come down and be your presence. And if you want a new spiritual experience, you do all the preparation necessary to permit the Spirit of truth to come down and enter you, think for you. That is, the Spirit will guide the thought. See how the Spirit is in charge of thought? Thought must be obedient to Spirit when you put it in that order, when you understand. When you understand that consulting one wild thought after another can only keep you wild and sick, then you let go, and then thoughts are tamed, so to speak, directed by the Spirit of truth, and you think so well. You think clearly, you think efficiently. You don't waste your energy in thinking wild thoughts. Some of you waste the thoughts. Some of you have madhouse mind, right? Now, one thing that Christ taught by his being, by his presence, and by physical action. You see, when Christ was on earth, nobody could recognize him as the Christ. There's even one place in the New Testament that said, and many walked with him no more. You know, just like here. People came, they heard his talk. He was standing on the hilltop talking to the people down there. And you could just see that man and the woman standing together and muttering to each other as they heard him talk. And right in the middle of the talk, they got up and walked away to their doom. One thing that Christ taught by his physical presence, which included spiritual presence, was a physical lesson which was the only level which human beings could understand. Later they could take a physical action of his and translate it into spiritual action and understand it. And that's what we're going to go into right now. Because Christ knew the degradation, the insanity of human nature, he had to preach the cure, the healing. But degenerate human beings never want to hear the cure, because that would be the end of their degeneracy, which they call spirituality. They are divided. They have a showcase personality, right? So Christ decided to teach a certain lesson, and remember, he was always talking to little children. 50, 60, 80 years old, 20 years old, they're all little children, aren't they? And still are. He knew this. He knows how thick people are, how foolish. He decided to use his physical body to illustrate a spiritual point. And it all happened naturally as follows. As he persisted and never gave up telling the religious hypocrites that they were religious hypocrites, the leaders of the church of the day, religious groups of the day, conspired to silence him lest they lose their hold on the people. You see, religious leaders are always afraid of losing their false identity, which they now get through the identities of false followers, right? They conspired to crucify him. And one day he was with his disciples out in the garden, and Judas came along. Judas said, the one I kiss is he. See, the Roman soldiers didn't know which was Christ. They didn't pay any attention to her. They don't pay attention to a religious leader unless he threatens their politics. They don't care about it. They don't care. Do what you want. But you try to take over our government, we're going to get you. So the Roman soldiers didn't really care. The religious leaders did because they were threatened, right? They were the threatened ones, not the Romans. But the Romans had political and military power. So they had to be called on because Jerusalem, in those days, was under Roman domination. So Judas kissed Christ, and then the Roman soldiers knew which one was indeed Christ. Betrayed him. How's that for the supreme hypocrisy? Betraying Christ with a kiss. It happens today, of course. So the Roman soldiers came and they took him away. He didn't resist. He told Peter, put up the sword. Don't fight. He had a plan. Christ had a conscious plan. And they let them take him away, and you know the story. They took him to trial. Put a crown of thorns on his head. Since you're a king, we better give you a crown. They scorned him. Pontius Pilate asked, what is truth? And Christ remained silent. He knew they wouldn't understand if he tried to explain truth, because they didn't want an explanation. Pilate washed his hands. See what a cowardly act. I wash my hands. See what a difference. He'd been a true man. If he'd said, what are you doing with this man? How has he harmed you? You religious hypocrites. You're the ones at fault, not him. That can't happen. Can't happen in this world. The very fact that you're an authority in politics means that you're lost, and you'll always side with the side of the lost. They took him away. He had to haul his own cross, right? Heavy weight. Remember, he was a human being who had a human body which suffered. It was pretty heavy. Have a cross must have been a pretty heavy thing. Finally had someone else help him, as I understand the story. Took him up on the hill, crucified him, and he cried out, I thirst. See, he had physical appetites like we have. And they gave him vinegar, which I suppose was the thing to give him in those days. And he died. And 3 days later, he arose. I wonder if you see the parallel of what he was teaching, of course. Think about it a little bit. Oh, what a lesson. He illustrated it physically, and now you see it psychologically and spiritually. You have to die to the social self. You have to die to everything that is wrong about you. Now, look at this special point. As he was being carried away to Crucifixion Hill, Calvary, all his disciples and even his own mother were in great fear, weren't they? The Christ that we worshipped, who told us all these marvelous truths, instead of making him a king, they're crucifying him. What will happen if we lose Christ? What will happen if we lose this man we've followed these years? His own mother there. They were in great fear. Now, look, he knew that that would happen to them. Of course he knew that. He knew their minds, little children. Now listen to this. The very act that terrified the followers, the disciples, the very act that terrified them turned into the act that gave all who accepted everlasting life. They feared the physical death of Christ because they didn't know that he had something higher than death in his being. See, little children, oh, you don't know how bad it is trying to explain things to little kids. He knew this, and he knew also that eventually, when he arose on the third day, that they would understand the whole truly spiritual drama that was played out. And he knew that a little bit of the truth would enter them, and that truth would explain to them the fact that death must precede life. We're talking about the death of delusions, not of the real. When you're lost, there's nothing real. Therefore, we're talking about the crucifixion of what is false. All right. If you should go this far in your spiritual journey, where you are hauling yourself off to crucifixion hell, I want you to notice how afraid you are of what's going to happen to you. Anyone? Is there one person who's gone this far? You must go all the way through it. You must actually be on that hill and be crucified. You must do it in spite of every fear you have. Do it. Go all the way. If you understand the depths of your own lostness, you'll want nothing in this life more than to go all the way. And you will then understand after the death of your illusory self, of your vanity, of your self-stupidity, after the vanishing of that, the vanishing of all your illusions, you will know what Christ knew. You will know just as much as you knew about the crucifixion, you will know about the resurrection. You know how you'll know? The Spirit of God himself will tell you. And you'll recognize it as the Spirit of God, the Spirit of Christ. Now you have a success that the world neither wants to know anything about or wants to follow. The final word is this. When you feel yourself being hauled off to the hill to be crucified, offer no resistance whatever. Let anything happen to your old nature that wants to happen to it. Let it go. And if you understand even a little bit where it leads to, you won't argue. You'll remain silent. You won't fight. And I will personally guarantee you that if you go all the way to Calvary, to the hill of crucifixion, you will be resurrected, and you will know what Christ taught and what Christ lived, because the truth belongs to all who want it more than they want anything else. Shallow minds are satisfied with shallow answers. If you have a shallow mind, or anyone who has a shallow mind, wants something more profound than that, you can do it providing you're willing to follow a spiritual law. And that spiritual law is to see the pain in the way you now think and act. It is right in front of you, the answer to every problem, every fear is right in front of every human being, and he refuses to see it. He will lie and lie and lie. If you have pain in your heart, mind, life, family, home, if you have pain, there is only one reason for it, which is that you have a shallow mind. You have a mind that maybe can operate your business, can plant a garden. Anyone can do that. And everyone is sorrowful. And they are hostile. Would you right now, right while you're listening to me, make it your rule of not daily life, not hourly life, but secondary life, to know where you suffer, you are wrong. Now there it is. You want to know what you're doing wrong. You ask, how do I perform? What do I do? What do I say? How should I behave? I will tell you how, and you tell yourself how. You no longer behave in the way of suffering, of hurt, of heartache. I know you don't understand that, so I'm going to explain it a little better. If your life is a series of conflicts, of having to be defensive, of being afraid of what life and people can do to you, all you have to know is to know that your present state is wrong because it's a state of pain. Now, here's why I tell you this. If there's something right in you that doesn't want to be shallow anymore, at the moment that you see your conflict and your wrinkled forehead and perplexity, at the same time that you see that is wrong, it will occur to you what to do that is right, which is to never again associate with anything that is wrong and painful. If it is painful, it is wrong. Now you know what to do. You no longer consent to suffering. You meet someone and they say something sharp to you and you go like that. Or someone is behaving in a way that distresses you. And you see your distress. All you have to know is that your distress is wrong. Seeing that it is wrong, you know that something is doing something to you that is bad for you. But you have to bring more than shallow thinking into it. You have to start bringing more into it. And you have to see how the you that you always talk about incredibly is the person that loves to feel conflict. Now I'm going to tell you a fact. Right now, right at this second, if you were to choose it, take the higher choice, you could drop all conflict, all questions, all pains, regardless of this horrible world that you live in with all its laws, with all its pounces on you. If you choose the higher course, right now, all self-harming thoughts, emotions, and actions could fall away. The reason this can happen is because there is something other than your present choice. But you won't choose that for fear again, as always, fear again of the extinction of all you have. Now, I have to tell you again that you are atheists in your present state. You don't know about God. Because, see, you would have to be an atheist. Because if you knew God, if you knew Christ, the Spirit of Christ, if you knew that, you would understand that God, who is indeed love, He does not say that you must continue to be lost in anxiety. You therefore do not know God, you do not know the Spirit of Christ. All you know, and which therefore is the object of self-worship, is pain, tension, anxiety. Now, I want to tell you a story. I'm going to develop it. Remember what I've said so far. Here's a businessman who's traveling through the countryside. And he gets lost, gets off on a little different kind of a road he's ever been on before, and he sees a town in front of him, village, several thousand people. So he drives into the town, thinking maybe do a little business there. And he stops, walks around the sidewalks a little bit. On the surface, it looks like an ordinary town. There are cafes and businesses and people walking around and garages and trees and little city parks somewhere. Ordinary little town. Except for one thing. He notices that a good deal of the time and energy of the people that he sees is taken up by one thing. And that is, they're taking a picture of a man and spending a lot of time with it. For example, they're taking this picture of a man, putting it on the trees, public trees, putting on their own homes in public places in front of buildings and all. And it's obvious to him that this man is a hero, the village hero. And he's thinking as he's watching this, and he's thinking to himself, look at all the energy these people are taking between running their home and running their business and their families and their lives. They're running around town putting up these pictures, and they're polishing it, and they're taking down old versions, putting up new ones, doing all sorts of things, just going around town putting up pictures of a man. So he looked a little closer at the picture of the man, and being a businessman, he understood certain advertising, publicity techniques. And he looked at the picture, and he nodded his head with professional approval of what he saw. You'll understand this. He understood this man being a public hero, you have to select the photograph pretty carefully, don't you? You might take 100 pictures of your hero, but only one is going to be suitable. Because the other 99, one it might show him you can show a hostile look on his face, or a stupid look, or he's looking up like that, something like that. So this is important. Here's a lesson in public propaganda. First of all, he has to look strong, right? But not fiercely strong, right? There has to be a hint of compassion. You know, I can't describe it. You have to see it. And you can be sure that what they went through, all 100 photographs, that's it. Strong and yet kindly, understanding, goodness, a good man. That was the picture they chose, and that's what he saw there. Baffled, he asked several people around town, what's this? I see you spending all this time putting up photographs of a man who's apparently your hero. Why? What are you doing? And the answers he got were no answers at all. They were, you asked one woman, for example, and she Do you know how dumb the average human being is? Do you know how dumb? No, you don't. I'm telling you, the average human being is pretty dumb. They're bird brains. So we ask a bird-brained woman, what are you doing running around holding a picture up in front of you and wander around town? And she says, well, you know how people don't know what to say, even I'm illustrating because I do it. And you ask a man why he had a picture of the hero in the office of his store. He said, well, my father put it up, or left it up. It's been up there for 5 generations of hardware merchants in town. It's always been. See, no satisfactory answers, just answers that made no sense at all. He got curious. So when he went on back home to the big town where he lived, he went to the public library. And he went to the map room. He never ever heard of the town before, and apparently no one else did. So he looked it up, and sure enough, there it was, listed in the atlas, the map book with explanation. And the name of the town was Superstitionville. Now that made sense to him. And he looked up at the history of the town, and finally it became clear to him what was going on. Several hundred years ago, in this locality where the town was, the wolves inhabited the mountains around the town, and they'd come down night and day and attack the people and haul them off. The hero, several hundred years ago, came down and drove all the wolves out. Through legend, through story, through the need to have heroes, and now worship the man. There was his picture. Nobody knew why they really did it anymore. Here our businessman had to go down in the basement of the library and find an old dusty book that explained the whole. Nobody knew why they were doing it, and neither does society. Now I want to zero in on one point on this illustrative story, which is this. The citizens of Superstitionville had false needs, spending all their energies putting up the sign, trying to make themselves feel secure, feel as if they had something to protect them and all that. This is a false need. Now you have to find the parallel in your life, and if you really see it, you're going to be reluctant to let go of your false needs. First you'll be shocked, then you'll be reluctant, and then you have to keep with it until you drop it. All this waste of time and energy doing something that serves no real purpose. Now, I tell you, this is the world you live in. Every church, your charitable organizations, business organizations, everything in private life, inwardly, outwardly, the world is wasting itself doing unnecessary things. Now you have to see why they do them, because they think there is a reason for it. But you ask them the reason, then they will lie, because they really don't know that they're serving a false need inside themselves. Now you listen to this. When Christ was on the cross, he cried out, "It is finished." I tell you, your work of putting aside, sweeping out, tossing out false activities and false deeds, I tell you, it is finished. It's done. You don't have to serve false needs inside or outside anymore. You're free of them right now. Right now. By the way, a little side thought. When Christ had a physical body, that body lived in time, did it not? His crucifixion and resurrection was a triumph of eternity over time. You can do the same. Remember I quoted yesterday, he said, what I have done, you can do also. False needs wear you out. How did a false need, a false glorification, a false Savior inside your mind, how did that tire you a little bit this morning when you were talking with someone else? We'll get into a little more detail of that in a little bit. But can you see some false action or duty which you can only suspect now was unnecessary? You can only suspect it. You don't see it. If you saw it, you wouldn't do it. To see is to be free. But if a person doesn't see, and you try to tell him about it, because he doesn't see, he will deny it. In short, he will lie. Now, why were all these people wasting their time putting up the hero when there was no need for it at all? Because they themselves manufactured an artificial need because they didn't know what else to do with themselves that was real. Believe me, when you really know the way home, change the picture a little bit, when you really know the way home, the right road, because it feels right under your feet, you don't go off onto detours. You don't ask questions. You don't ask questions anymore. Should I get married or shouldn't I get married? Should I do this? Should I do that? All you do is stay on the road, and all answers about false detours are clear to you. When your feet feel solid on the right highway, all you have to do is see that crooked path off to the left, or that downward path off to the right. You know better than to go down there. You felt what was right. Right? Now, I have given you an example of how you can do something you have never done before. Too bad. And see if you can see it deeper than words can convey. I see the situation as I'm talking to you. I put it into words and into ideas. The words and ideas go to you, and now you have to take those words and ideas and let the Spirit of truth in you receive them rightly so that it's not distorted by your mind. So that's that. I want you to know that you have never done something for yourself that you can start doing this morning. You know what it is? To show mercy on yourself. Oh, how cruel you are! Delusion is cruelty. You have never shown mercy on yourself, and mercy can be defined as starting on the path to inner restoration. Don't you need restoration pretty badly, inwardly, emotionally? Well, something came to me. I want to interrupt myself. Aren't you tired of being scared? It is finished. A life of non-fear is available instantly right now. Why won't you show mercy on yourself? You plead to God for mercy. You ask the tax man not to tax you so much. You want mercy from people. And you're the last one to extend mercy to yourself. How viciously merciless you are to your life.